Hello and welcome everyone to Aucademy.
Hello.
It's me, Katie Munday, and I'm here today with our very own David Gray-Hammond of Emergent Divergence, and we're talking all things de-pathologizing mental health and what that means for autistic people as well. We'll do some little self-identifying things and then we'll get cracking. So I am a squishy, round, white person with actually not particularly messy hair today. It's kind of short back and sides hair. I've got big round glasses, which are brown and orange. I'm wearing a bright green hoodie and my usual Rey Mysterio t-shirt. And I'm sitting in front of Simon's favourite green old lady curtains. And I use they, them pronouns, just in case anyone needs to know that.
I am David Gray-Hammond. I am a white person in their 30s. I forgot how old I was for a second there. And I am wearing thick rimmed glasses. I have a beard that desperately needs to see something to trim it. And I have a shaved head, a lip piercing, and a giant hole in my ear. On purpose. I'm wearing a black Jack and Jones t-shirt, sat next to this lovely bookcase, which definitely needs anchoring to the wall.
Yes. Slightly worried for you, David. I'm not going to lie. We were talking earlier, it was just going, get moving. Yeah, so if we're talking about de-pathologization, if you could tell us a little bit about what that means, David, that'd be a good start, I think.
Okay, well, to understand de-pathologizing stuff, you have to understand that the way the world has worked is through something called the pathology paradigm. And there's two words there which might need explaining. So pathology, first and foremost, is the study of illness, disorder, problems that are wrong with the body, basically. It comes from the Greek pathos, which I believe means something along the lines of illness or disorder, and ology. I don't know what the Greek word is that ology is short for, but it's the study of. And a paradigm is, when you have a paradigm, it's a generally accepted way of thinking. It's usually, a consensus that has been reached, and it informs the way that society thinks about things. So when we talk about the pathology paradigm, what we're actually saying is there is a consensus in society that the things it refers to are inherently pathological. People have probably come across this idea when talking about being autistic, because being autistic is heavily pathologized by professionals, researchers, medics, even other autistic people sometimes use pathological language to discuss being autistic. But today I want to look a bit wider than autism, because being autistic is rarely the only neurodivergence that we encounter in our community. And specifically what I want to look at is mental health, which autistic people are far more likely to have mental health concerns than the general population, for a number of reasons that we'll get into later in the live. But basically, depathologization means to move away from the pathology paradigm. And one might ask, what are we going to move into? Well, the simple answer is the neurodiversity paradigm, which, is the same thing as pathology paradigm, but you taking a neurodiversity accepting approach rather than the idea that we're all ill and broken.
Yeah. And interestingly, because we were talking about, David and I were writing earlier, and we were talking about the neurodiversity paradigm, the neurodiversity movement, and just the word neurodiversity and neurodivergent earlier. And I think sometimes that's kind of taken as, you know, like fully accepting of who we are, like, oh, it's all wonderful. Like, I'm autistic and every day is full of rainbows and flowers and unicorn poos and like it's all glitter and wonderful. Where actually neurodiversity paradigm is saying, yeah, there's a lot of strengths to being neurodivergent. There's a lot of good things to it. But actually most of us need support, like additional support, and it's not to take away from any kind of, I don't necessarily want to use the word struggle, but the things that we come up across, the issues for, and they're quite shared experience of, you know, from within and without, I think, you know, like bullying and various other things like that. So I just wanted to put that in there. Like, neurodiversity paradigm doesn't mean that everything's all rosy and lovely. It's just a way of understanding ourselves that isn't all doom and gloom.
And it's interesting that you mention, you know, support, because that lack of access to support that so many of us have experienced plays a big role in why mental health concerns are so prevalent in our community.
Yeah, especially I suppose for kind of late diagnosed people or late realized people, and people that just don't even get the chance to be realized or diagnosed at all. And because those people are usually of other marginalized identities, you know, part of the traveller community, Black, Indigenous people of color, stuff like that. Like, you know, the marginalizations kind of sit on top of each other and you know, produce more mental health concerns than not that any of them are necessary then, but there are even more so, if that makes sense. Not sure my words are wording tonight, but so why do we think it's important to kind of de-pathologize mental health?
There's a misconception in society that when we have mental health concerns, we are ill or broken, in need of fixing. Now, this is not to invalidate the fact that having a mental health problem can cause immense suffering. But whilst the idea, the illness model, the pathology model, the pathology paradigm has done some good for helping all of us, autistic people included, access psychiatric medicine, for example, and start saying we need support with this, there is an onus of responsibility on us as the person experiencing a mental health problem. The responsibility that's placed on us is that there is something wrong with you and you need to get better. But actually, when we look broader and you can take a broad brush to this really, and not make too many inaccuracies. It's not people that are broken or ill. If we were ill, there would be some kind of biomedical test that could diagnose a mental health problem. I know that this is considered quite a Satsian approach, but there is no test that can diagnose depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, OCD. We don't know exactly where mental health problems come from, and I think this is largely because we have a growing understanding of neurology and the way brains work. It's evolving every day, our understanding. The one thing we might never understand, though, is at what point that neurology crosses into the self and becomes a human mind. And with that disconnect, we can't prove that mental health problems are an actual pathology that are causing an illness, and that's why we present in the way we do. And this is why I believe the neurodiversity model fits much better, because we can start splitting neurodiversity into a couple of categories, really. So you've got your innate neurodivergent people. So we're talking about autistic people, attention hyperactive people, people with Tourette's, people who were essentially born neurodivergent. But then we can start looking at acquired neurodivergence. So people who, for example, through trauma have had the physical wiring of their brain, the functioning of their brain altered in a permanent way. Because let's face it, mental health is relatively permanent. You can learn to live alongside it and coexist with it, but there's no magic pill that makes most of these things disappear. I know, because I've looked for one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because when you were talking about support, I find that any support that I've ever gained for mental health was either been usually medical anyways. Take these pills and I'll never check in with you about whether you're getting on well with them, whether you're still taking them, anything like that. I was just like given certain antidepressants and off I popped. And then to be given, I say given, there was a wait list and there was a lot of phone calls, and I hate making phone calls. So I could get CBT, which doesn't work very well with autistic brains. I'm not convinced it works well with a lot of brains, but it certainly didn't necessarily. I think because it's based on kind of behaviorism and what you want to be able to physically achieve. But what I want to be able to achieve is a more peaceful mind, and CBT doesn't do that. It focuses more on
your reactions to your mind.
Basically. So it's reactionary, it's putting out fires. Whereas I would just prefer to have either, just a very well controlled fire or no fire at all. Actually, would be quite nice.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, so it's just interesting that even support is very much medicalized and very much based on the kind of pathology paradigm as well. You're ill, therefore take medication, which absolutely works for some people, and that's I sit here and take medication for my OCD, and I'm very glad that I do.
I have I'm diagnosed with a psychotic disorder. I put it in inverted commas because I hate the word disorder, but I take medication, and you know what? Yeah, it does help, and my life is a lot more livable thanks to that medication. But it is such an individual experience, and a lot of the medical profession treats it as a one-size-fits-all experience.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think, just because I've been through this recently as a pregnant person as well, you can't always keep carrying on with those medications, or like hormonally things change for you. I can imagine it's probably the same for anyone who's on HRT or going through a massive hormonal change. If you can't necessarily take your medication alongside that, which I know you can't necessarily do if you're breast or chest feeding as well. So that's just another thing I think about. It's not only is it not always accessible to all people anyways, even those who can access it, it's not accessible to us all the time.
Yeah.
So if your body and your brain and just you and your lifestyle get used to a certain thing, I know it's not necessarily the same thing, but I know a lot of people are having troubles with getting hold of their medications now. I'm going to assume it's something to do with Brexit. So they've been having trouble with getting all sorts of medications, not just for mental health, but like pain medications for fibro and stuff like that. And that's a really worrying thing. Yeah, definitely.
Well, this neatly brings us back to the question, which is, why do we need to depathologize? And I think we sort of highlighted it here, which is with the heavy reliance on the medical models, prescribe this to treat this symptom, prescribe that to treat that symptom, and treating things as symptoms as part of a disorder. The problem isn't necessarily with the person. You've got to look at the environment that is causing a person to experience a mental health problem. So perhaps the reason it's important to depathologize is because medication is not a one-size-fits-all approach, and it's only going to work for some people. Whereas if we can alter the environments that people are living in that are causing them to acquire a form of neurodivergence that is causing them to experience negative things, then we may be able to actually, reduce the harm being done to people. Because let's not forget, medication does some wonderful things, but it comes with a lot of side effects. It really is not for everyone. Some people just can't tolerate certain medications. And so if we start looking at, actually, let's look at the way society is working, rather than let's just go straight away with the medicine. It's a slow process, but eventually we may get to a world where there's less people in distress. And an interesting thought for me is, all of the diagnostic criteria for the things in the DSM are based on a person in distress. What if we can create a world where people experience less distress, and we get to see a whole new era of neurodivergent people who are thriving? What's that going to look like?
It'd be amazing. I wonder, though, if we were all thriving, I wonder if the need for the DSM would even exist. Because I, like a lot of people, think that, autism, ADHD, and various other things that are in the DSM just shouldn't exist within the DSM anyways, because it's all deficit based. I, like many other people, only got my diagnosis because I could explain to someone how my being autistic makes my life difficult and hard. And all the things I struggle with on a daily basis. So they're like, that's a really tough thing to do, all of that paperwork beforehand, which some of us are not known for being particularly good at anyways. And then having to then stand in front of a stranger and go, I'm however old and I can't cross a road properly. Like, that was one of my things. Like, I had to sit in front of a stranger and say that, which is not a problem, but it's just when you have to spend like 4 or 5 hours basically explaining to someone everything that you're shit at. And then they're like, oh, there's mental health problems with autistic people. Because every hoop we have to jump through, if we're even given the privilege to be able to jump through them in the first place, is just like, well, explain to me how shit your life is, and then I'll judge whether it's shit enough for us to diagnose you. And then post-diagnosis, you'll get no help anyways. So you download everything down to me, and I will do fuck all with that information. And I'll send you on your merry way, and you might get a leaflet if you're lucky, for somebody else that you've got to ring, email, all the other inaccessible ways that aren't the best ways for us to communicate with other people anyways. It's exceedingly frustrating. And if you've got to go through disability benefits and other stuff like that, it's just, I think people are of the non-disabled people are definitely of the opinion that disabled people get given stuff. And us within this community are like, are you joking? Everything to be fought for, everything has to be, these are the things I struggle with, and I'm going to wait for a non-disabled person and a neuromajorative person to say, yeah, probably I might help you with something at some point, maybe.
And this really is the crux of why so many neurodivergent communities see so many people struggle with their mental health. It's because every day can be a battle for us. This world is not designed with us in mind. In fact, I'll go one step further. I'd say it's intentionally designed to exclude us.
Absolutely. And if you have other marginalizations on top of that,
yes, you have to start looking at minority stress and all sorts. To really understand the nature of what disabled people go through. Yeah, it's ridiculous the way the world works.
Yeah, it's really, sorry, it's a bit doom and gloom. But I think the idea of depathologization can also help against that as well. Like, you know, if people aren't considered to be inherently ill, disordered, dysfunctional, you know, I think when I read we did a live here a couple of months ago that was on ADHD and what it says in the DSM about ADHD. And, you know, I think I read The Sixth Failure and just thought, I cannot read this anymore. Like, people are not failures. Like, it's really, really difficult to read. It's seriously dehumanizing. So I think I don't think anything can stop. It has to start with, you know, medical knowledge and practice to become demedicalized.
Yeah.
You know, it has to be within systems that already exist. You know, unless we have some kind of overthrowing V for Vendetta moment and you know, rip down and destroy everything. It has to, you know, in a realistic way. It's got to be done through medical, you know, institutions, which is scary.
The problem is that institutions in the world will serve whatever economic system is in place at the time. And it sounds a bit conspiratorial, but there is a good reason why we rely so heavily on like pharmaceutical intervention when it comes to mental health. And I was just reading in James Davies' book, Sedated. It's called, hang on, I've got it here, How Modern Capitalism Created Our Mental Health Crisis.
Oh my goodness, that is so your book.
Yes.
That is you.
And it's quite eye-opening because when you look at it, there is a lot of profit in pharmaceuticals. And a lot of the disorders in the DSM are voted in by committee rather than, you know, after years of rigorous research. It's more that a group of psychiatrists get together, form a committee and go, we think this should be in there and this is what we think the diagnostic criteria should be. And then they vote it in. But the bit that they don't often disclose is that a lot of the psychiatrists on those committees have investment in the pharmaceutical companies that are coming up with, you know, ways of treating those conditions. Now, I'm not for any minute saying that, you know, mental health doesn't exist. Like it does.
Oh,
it does.
absolutely.
Like I've had enough psychotic episodes in my life to know just how harmful it can be when your mental health runs away with you. But we've actually got to look at the way it's not just society in general that is generating this suffering. It is the particular type of society we live in, especially in Western culture. You know, this very consumerist capitalist economy where, you know, people are judged on their ability to produce profits and pay taxes. And, you know, weirdly, it's kind of the measure of disability in our society for most people is, well, you can't work, so therefore you're disabled. That shouldn't be the measure of disability. And yeah, I mean, it always brings me back to that idea that Nick Walker in her book talks about, you know, throw away the master's tools. I think part of the problem is whenever we try to reduce the stigma around mental health, even as autistic people, when we try to reduce the stigma around mental health, we're still working with the tools that our current society has given us. So I think to truly depathologize mental health, we need to come up with an entirely new toolkit.
Oh my goodness, what on earth would that even look like?
That's the bit where I get stuck, you know. It's not something that just one of us is going to come up with overnight. It's the reason why we as a community, why we as the neurodiversity movement need to embrace the idea of depathologizing mental health and work together to create that toolkit.
I think there's going to be, I mean, like you've experienced on Twitter recently with some of your posts, there's going to be a little bit of pushback. Not obviously, people can make the choices they want. We're not a cult, you know. So if people want to come along with this depathologization, that would be brilliant. But there's going to be some people who really, really struggle with this. You know, because we've been told all our lives, oh, you've got depression because this has happened, or you've got PTSD because this very specific thing happened. And you know, medication, maybe some kind of therapy that probably won't actually do anything for you, and will actually stop you from getting involved in NHS, other things through the NHS, because quite frankly, you've had your tick box of the talking therapy under us. So I can understand why people find it really, really difficult to sit there with their, you know, and I say this as a person with depression and anxiety and obsessive compulsive, and I have had them for a very, very, very long time. And I think maybe, yeah, there's just a little bit of pushback there, but I wonder what you think about that.
I mean, for me, I mean, obviously, specifically referencing what happened on Twitter, you know, I made quite a simple post that, you know, got like 40,000 likes and 5,000 retweets. Problem was, a lot of people really didn't like the fact that I was suggesting that neurodivergence encompasses more than autism and ADHD. And I think it's because when we start to include mental health, there's a few narratives that are getting challenged. So one narrative I saw people bring up is that, well, mental health is an illness, and autism and ADHD aren't illnesses. Are you trying to say autism and ADHD are illnesses? And I was like, no, I'm trying to say none of them are illnesses. People didn't like that, but why did they not like that? I think it comes out of, there's some toxic positivity when it comes to autism and ADHD, for starters. People have become so desperate to get away from the pathology model that we deny some of the really shit bits about being disabled. Not to mention, the idea that mental health was an illness seemed wonderful. It brought about the "it's okay not to be okay" movement, and you know, people were starting to open up and talk about mental health thanks to it. The problem is we didn't really notice, because it happened gradually, is what it's doing is it's normalizing suffering. Like, you know, that it's okay not to be okay. You've just got to talk about your suffering. That's great, but why don't we talk about why we're suffering? Because it's not because something has gone wrong in me. Like, it's because the world I live in cannot meet my needs. In fact, abjectly refuses to meet my needs at times. And it doesn't provide me with the tools to meet my own needs. But that's a really difficult narrative to wrap your head around when you've got so centered on the "I am ill, I need fixing" narrative.
Yeah. And I think there's a real, I don't know if gaslight is quite the word I'm looking for, but it's that it's okay not to be okay. Yeah, I don't know if I feel like it's a little bit gaslighty. Because it almost assumes that, I don't know, it just feels really invalidating in a way that I can't really describe particularly well. It kind of feels a little bit condescending, a little bit.
Let's be honest,
It's okay, because everyone feels a little bit, you know, sad sometimes, and it's the same old with, you know, well, everyone's a little bit autistic, and God, yeah, no, I'm really OCD. You want to see how I arrange my spice rack and all that? And you just think, what are you talking about, Sandra? No.
And you can guarantee none of these people are going to turn around and go, yeah, well, I'm a little bit psychotic myself. You know, like,
it's funny. No, nobody's like that.
Because that's what my not okay is. You know, if I am not okay, I'm hearing voices, paranoid delusions, visual hallucinations, Like, I can't physically string a sentence together properly because my brain is so confused, and actually that kind of okay is absolutely not okay. I mean, I'm not saying it's not okay to talk about it. If you need to talk about it, please do. Like, always talk about it. I'm very much of the opinion I would rather hear you talk about something bad than have to attend your funeral because you didn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this idea of it's okay not to be okay, it's not okay not to be okay, because what we're normalizing our suffering, and that's not okay. Actually, I think a better tagline would be like, it's okay to talk. It's okay to say I'm not okay, but it's not okay to not be okay. It sucks.
Yeah. I think it's protective again to people, to organizations, to big pharma, to everybody else. It's okay that I take, and this is not med shaming. This is, I'm not going to do that, but it's okay that I take, however many diazepam a day, because it's okay not to be okay. So kind of take your medicine and be quiet kind of thing. And that's not me medication shaming. That's me saying that the systems that we have in place at the moment push medication, or they don't push anything. And when I say push that, I mean give it to people, but also, there's money to be made there. Like, it would be ridiculous for me to sit here and say that somebody's not making some serious bank on people's suffering.
Yeah, and whilst we're on that topic, we can't leave out the fact that carcerative care exists. People are taken into inpatient environments, and in some cases, in a lot of cases, they can be administered medication without their consent. And that raises some ethical questions. Now, I'm not saying we should just leave people to be a risk to themselves and others, because that can happen when mental health gets too negative. But I've been an inpatient twice, and actually some of the things that happen on those wards, it's really scary. Like, those wards serve a purpose, it's helpful to have that safe space with people who are trained to look after you when you're going through a crisis. But actually, that if you're there, for example, under section, and you don't believe you've got an illness, and you've got people saying, well, you can either take this medication willingly, or we're going to restrain you and give it to you, it becomes yet another trauma, which in my mind is only going to exacerbate things in the long run. And I think we have to start looking at, this idea that there needs to be more than medical approaches. We need holistic approaches. Now, medicine should always be part of a holistic approach because it has made some progress. Admittedly, psychiatry, its outcomes haven't improved hugely over the last 50 years, but it has a place in society. It's not a question of throw out the baby with the bathwater. But we need to be starting to take a holistic approach. What has been going on in this person's life? What is going on in this person's environment that has created an area of need that is not being met? Because then you can start looking, and actually you start looking at mental health and go, well, actually, this seems more like a protective factor. That person who was bullied horrendously at school and is now a depressed adult who does not want to go out and socialize with people. Is it that they're ill, or has their brain gone, being out and among peers is unsafe, so we're going to stay away from peer groups? Is it possible that actually a lot of the symptoms of mental health are the brain's best attempt to try and protect us from further harm?
Absolutely. And if they're all based on kind of the ideal, the typical, the normative, and especially in multicultural society, like, that just doesn't make any sense, because what is ideal and normal and good for me is not the same for other people. And why would non-autistic people be able to draw a circle around what is considered usual or appropriate or other words they like to litter around for autistic people and people with mental health conditions. Like, who gets to decide what's normal and usual and appropriate and okay and everything else like that? Where do all these metrics come from? Cis white men.
Yeah.
Of course, you're everywhere.
Yep.
So it's just like, what is, and awfully enough, it's, because when I was writing my my MRes dissertation, and I was talking about, I only very lightly touched on it, but mental health was something that came up a lot with the people I was talking to. So for those who don't know, I did my master's in research talking to trans and or non-binary autistic people just about their life experiences. And mental health came up quite a lot, and I didn't probe into that because obviously I'm not clinical, and that's not what I'm trained in. But I did obviously have to kind of link it back to things that are going on in the world today. And one of those was, I can't remember their name now for the life of me, but they were a trans person who I believe was also a person of colour, who was basically, I don't know if he phoned the police or someone who was part of their family or something like that, but somebody called the police to say they were having a mental health crisis. And, part of having a meltdown and everything else, and also being a person of colour, unfortunately, trigger warning, this person isn't with us anymore. They were shot by a police officer. Obviously, this is in the States. So that's the horrifying part of all of this, is that there's fatal consequences there. Because if there are systems in place that are supposed to support us, and then I'm not suggesting that the police were there, but for whatever reason the police were called for this person, and then this person comes in and makes things the worst they could be. It's I can understand why people are completely and utterly distrustful of disclosing their mental health to anybody. In the same way that disabled people had, do not resuscitate for, it's still there, do not resuscitate for kind of COVID, I don't know what you'd call it, like COVID
complications.
Yeah, there was a do not resuscitate for disabled people, which I believe is still there. And that's a very horrifying thing.
Yeah.
And so I can understand completely and utterly why people want to keep that to themselves and are ashamed, perhaps, of, and I don't just mean this with mental health, I mean this with any kind of neurodivergence. Like, it's scary out there. It's really horrifying. And if you add any kind of other marginalization to that, it's it's really, there's really serious consequences to.
And this is the problem with the system we live in, is that it is designed as a scaffold for neuronormative society, with neuronormativity being the idea that there is one type of normal that we should all be assimilated into. The system is a scaffold by design for neuronormativity, and as a result, it is willingly inflicting structural oppression onto marginalized groups. Because neuronormativity, it covers a lot more things than just mental health, autism, ADHD. It was only a few decades ago that being gay was considered a mental health problem. Neuronormativity is insidious. It gets into everything. I think it was Mel Baggs who wrote about the fact that you can find ableism somewhere amongst most forms of prejudice and bigotry.
And it's the same with racism, and it's the same with xenophobia, and and various other things, and anti-Semitism, and at the heart of neuronormativity and the idea of an ideal neurology sits white supremacy. I mean, he's sat right there. Because not only should the brain function in this way or be this way and produce stuff for somebody else to make money from, like also the brain has to be white. And any forms of it not being white and not being English speaking and not being Christian is the wrong way of having a brain.
And let's face it, if we had a political leader say this stuff out loud, we'd call them a fascist. But because it's being said quietly, through the way society works, we're all just going, yeah, this seems completely normal to me. Meanwhile, the building's burning down and we're just sat there going, yeah, I'm fine. It's cool. It's a little warm. I might take my jumper off, but...
But I think even that, because when we were writing earlier about things that we felt were positive about our own mental health, I don't know if I want to use conditions, but like our own mental health experiences, one of those things was self-awareness. Now, I feel like I've been told about how self-aware I am since I came out of the womb.
Yeah.
Everyone has always said, oh, yeah, you're really self-aware and you really understand people and you really understand systems and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, it's slowly destroying me because I am angry and frustrated about a lot of things that I can make some kind of maybe minute dent in. But I can't, it's never gonna, and now I have a son, is it going to be sorted in my lifetime? Probably not. Is it going to be sorted in his lifetime? I don't know. It could possibly get worse. But yeah, so it might be we've probably been a bit doom and gloom for 45 minutes. So it might be nice to break that up a bit. Whilst we were talking about I was talking about what we were writing earlier about kind of the good parts of our mental health, or the things that we feel about our mental health experiences that have actually been quite positive for us. Can we talk about that for a second, just to calm things down a bit, maybe?
Absolutely. I mean, as we wrote earlier, I experience psychosis, which means that my brain effectively from time to time creates its own reality. And what this actually can look like in terms of positive things is I can be intensely creative. I can imagine things that are actually so abstract that I often don't know how to put them into words. I think I have quite a deep empathy for people because I don't want anyone else to struggle the way I've struggled. So I always try and approach this as, if I was this person, how would I want to be approached? And yeah, that self-awareness you talked about, like I hear this a lot as well, especially from professionals who work with me regarding my mental health. The word they use is that I have a great deal of insight.
Oh yeah, I've been told that as well. Yeah.
It's a bit of a buzzword in psychology and psychiatry at the moment, insight. And basically your measure of how ill you are is whether or not you have insight into your condition. It's a weird one. But I have a lot of self-awareness, and I have that self-awareness because I've had to have that level of self-awareness to survive. I mean, I'm not just autistic. I don't just have mental health issues. I'm a recovering addict. I had to do a lot of work to look at why I was using drugs and alcohol. I had to really consider what was driving that. And then I had to think about what was going to work for me to keep me from going back to that. And I have to do this day in and day out, because if the minute you stop doing these things, you risk yourself relapsing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to say that as a several time abuse survivor, it's not quite the same thing, but drugs and alcohol are definitely attached to all of that as well for me. Yeah, you do have to understand the slippery slopes, and how many of them are back down to that, and all the safety nets that you can put in between, and how they work and how they need to be maintained and stuff like that. Like that's definitely a thing. And I feel like perhaps I don't know that there'll ever be an autistic person without mental health concerns, but I wonder what they would say about it, because I feel like it's an autistic thing as well. And it certainly is in my experience, because I was acutely aware that I was different from everyone around me. And if I wasn't acutely aware of it, people were going to tell me how I was. You know, oh, you're weird, you're a freak. There was all things about whether I was a bloke or whether I was a girl, and just all the hideous shit that kids say. So even if I wasn't aware, like especially in kind of come to senior school and becoming a teenager, yeah, I was told every day how I was different to other people. And I think because of that, and a lot of us have this tendency to enjoy or revel in understanding, like problem solving patterns, all of that kind of thing. I'm verging on stereotyping, but I know that's certainly my experience of things. I feel, and I've said it before, like I feel like Dr. Spock. I feel like I'm kind of vaguely look like everyone out here, but we have got totally different cultures.
Yeah.
So it was almost, I feel like an anthropologist going, what are these people up to? This is strange. This is peculiar. I want to learn all about their ways. So that's what I've always done. And then people say, oh, you're really good with other people. And I'm like, yeah, it's not difficult. Like, because people are all quite similar to each other in my experience. So people are quite easy to talk to. In that respect, for me, that's a me thing. That's not an everybody thing, of course. But people, I think, are when you spent, I spent 32 years now, being enthralled with every intricate detail of what I affectionately, unaffectionately, don't know, call the normies. So yeah, you are self-aware, because I have no choice but to be self-aware, and I don't think many of us do, because we realize that we are the odd one out in whatever room we go into. Those of us who don't know until later on that, oh, you're ADHD, oh, you are autistic, oh, you actually, a friend of mine didn't get diagnosed dyslexic and with other learning disabilities until he was in like his mid-30s going to university. Like, spent all this time being called slow and stupid and thick and lazy and irresponsible, and when actually all of these things are because we've just wired differently. Yeah, I kind of went on one then. I wasn't quite sure of the point I was making, but I think, self-awareness. That's why we're self-aware, because we have no choice.
And I think it ties quite neatly back into the de-pathologizing stuff, because once we de-pathologize our mental health, we start to recognize that, okay, this is just another way that I am neurodivergent. And like any form of neurodivergence, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but also it's not all bad. Every form of neurodivergence can give us strengths and struggles. Sometimes it's not going to be balanced by any stretch of the imagination. For some people, their neurodivergence could be heavily weighted on the bad side, and that's because, but you've got to then look at the environment around them once again.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, when we don't meet people's needs, they end up in distress.
Yeah.
And this is the fundamental thing, is that we live in a society that is not meeting people's needs. And that is why people are in distress, not because they're ill. No one is broken. No one is ill. We just need help to meet our own needs.
I had something to add to that and I've totally lost it. Yeah, I don't know if I added my like good parts of my OCD and my depression and stuff. Because actually when we went to write this, and I'm sure Ben will put it up in the comments or wherever. Actually, have you even, I don't know if you've published it actually, David.
I'm hitting publish after this.
Oh, okay. We'll have to share it another time then. But you know, and we sat there and said about the fact that, you know, there's good, there's bad, and actually neutral, probably. And then we sat there going, well, we should possibly put some of our own kind of positives on there. And actually, it was a difficult list to write. Actually, I think.
Yeah.
At least it was for me. But self-awareness was definitely one of them, and introspection. Yeah, empathy, like you said. And also just an acceptance of other people and where they're at, and taking them for their word on stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and believing them, and not that I have the power to do this, but like validating them in that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a disability thing as well. Not that neurodivergence and disability are necessarily two different things. But, you know, it's very easy for someone to go, I don't have the spoons for this today. I'm feeling really low for this today. I just don't have the energy for this. And you just take them at their word because you know what that feels like. Because yesterday you felt like that, or tomorrow you're going to feel like that. Or and I think that's a nice part of it. And you know, we are both people here who support young people. I think what you do at Gecko is young people, or is it adults? I'm not sure.
No, I work with young people.
Yeah, young people. Like, it's not surprising. My team at work, I said this last time I was on actually, but there's a few of us who are ADHD. There are a few of us who are autistic. I've got a fellow with cerebral palsy who I work with. We are all at work. We are all drawn to the caring, supporting, loving kind of jobs. And I would think that most of the autistic people I know are like that as well. Even with the kids I work with, there's very so like we went to Chesington on Sunday, and one of our boys walks on tiptoes all the time. And most of the time that works for him, and sometimes he falls over. So and he fell over, and one of this other boys, who they don't really interact with each other, but as soon as he fell over, he was like, "Oh, and it's okay, and I'll help you up, and I'll take your bag," and all. I just thought that is absolutely wonderful. And like two 10-year-old boys, and I'm not too sure that two 10-year-old boys who are neuronormative would be quite the same way. You know, it'd be more like, "Oh, you dickhead, why falling on the floor?" That's definitely my kind of area that I live in. Would be, you know, a lot taking the piss and you know, ribbing them for falling over and all that kind of thing. Which is not necessarily a problem, but it's just interesting to see, having worked with kids in what would be considered like mainstream settings, and having worked with the kids that I do now, like the difference is quite stark actually.
But it highlights that idea that neurodivergence, it's more than an identity, it is a culture as well.
Oh, and there's definitely community there, or at least there's community there to be had if it's wanted, and of course if it can be accessed. And I think that's the nice part of it. I think again, I spoke about this the other week. I keep coming on to Aucademy too often. I keep telling from the same stuff. But you know, when I went from kind of reading all my stuff at university, there was very deficit disordered, this, you know, the same old junk we've been reading for years. And then found Aucademy and the actually autistic kind of community online. You know, there was community here that I just wasn't, if I had kept reading the academic stuff, and even the training we get at work is based off that. So there was no, if I didn't work with the kids that I work with and see all the joy and the love and the laughter and all of that side of things, and then have the neurodivergent family online, I would be a very sad person with probably quite a lot of internalized ableism, most definitely, because everything I've been taught about being autistic or autism is, you know, weird and strange and picky and problems, and they can't do this and they can't say this, and you know, so I think there's definitely community there because you actually see yourself reflected in other people, not just this constant list of all the things, all the performances you can't do, or not just you can't do, but also like, I can't be asked with that. What is that? You know, the small talks, the eye contact, the being around big groups of people is all things that a lot of us kind of just don't really care for.
Yeah,
let alone,
and
we can't perform it. It's just that a lot of us really just, I don't really want to.
And all of this positive knowledge that autistic people have about themselves, that's thanks to the autistic community doing the work to try and de-pathologize being autistic. And I want to extend that to people like me who are not just autistic. You know, I mean, my psychotic disorder, the diagnosis is really complicated. I won't explain it, but the simpler way of putting it is that it's very similar to schizophrenia. I think about people like me and the things that we experience and the way we're told that we're ill and we're getting ill again and you need more medicine and, you know, you need to make sure you do these things to stay well. And actually, I would like people like me to have the same thing that autistic people have in their community, a world of shared knowledge and experience where they're saying, you know what, it's okay to be you and you're not broken. You don't need fixing, but there are things you can do to help yourself feel better.
Yeah, definitely. You know? I wonder if that exists already, because I believe there's the MAD community. So there's the idea that the word mad has been kind of reclaimed by some people who have mental health concerns. And there's definitely a mad Twitter, but I've never really plugged into it. In the same way, it's going to sound very peculiar, but in the same way that I never have with my asthma, because I don't know what to say about not being able to breathe. You know, like, and brilliant. There is a, you know, obviously there's the I don't know how you'd say it, nest void.
No end in sight.
Yeah, I always say nest void in my head. That's probably not how you say it at all, but you know, obviously that exists on Twitter and various other places as well. So that's where I, if I ever talk about asthma and stuff like that, I would go there. But I don't know if we just compartmentalize ourselves. You know, in the same way that I don't think you and I would go to a, you know, the glasses Twitter
Yeah.
Because what I got to say about that, I can't see very well. I wear my glasses. I still can't see very well, but crack on.
This is part of the problem, though, isn't it? Is we all have our own little corners of social media, and lots of us aren't overlapping the way we should. And actually, could you imagine? Well, I think it would be really cool, actually, if Mad Twitter kind of overlapped with the autistic community, because there is a lot of crossover, and so I would definitely encourage anyone who has seen some good tweets, from Mad Twitter or knows some good accounts to, drop them in the old comments, and I will go through those comments and follow all the things just to have a read. Because I'd be interested. I've always had a bit of a weird relationship with this whole reclaiming the word mad thing.
Okay.
It feels a bit like reclaiming a slur, and I'm not sure where I stand on that, but I'm still interested to see what they have to say. I wouldn't describe myself as anti-psychiatry either, because I know there's a big anti-psychiatry movement. But I'm definitely a dissenter. I'm just not sure what kind of dissenter I am.
Yeah. I think. Well, it's the same for queer and various other things. It doesn't suit everyone who would technically come under that banner. But it's interesting that Mad Twitter exists. And then I think like the idea of whilst we're talking about reclaimed words and how they're used to name disabled groups. I believe that Crip Twitter also exists as well. So Crip is definitely a thing there. So there will be huge swathes of people who are Crip, mad, actually autistic. So there's definitely overlap there, but I mean that you only get so many things on Twitter. Can't use all of them on hashtags. So but it would be interesting to see that overlap, because like I said earlier, an autistic person without mental health experiences and concerns is just I don't know if that person exists. I'm not convinced.
The problem I've got is I belong to so many communities that I forget about parts of myself. Like I haven't written about my queer experiences in ages. Like it's been a really long time, because I'm so busy talking about like mental health and being autistic and autistic experience and all the things that encompasses. And I'm like, oh hey, actually I forgot I'm queer, aren't I? Like,
dun dun dun. Yeah, I think possibly we go through phases as well, don't we? But that's a very if Tanya was joining us today, I don't think she's feeling very up for it today. She's got a lot going on at work. But yeah, I never say it properly. Monotropism.
Monotropism. Yeah. I can never decide which pronunciation I like, but Tanya would say monotropism, so let's go with Tanya.
Monotropism.
But yeah, like that whole monotropic brain thing, we get into that attention tunnel on one thing. For me at the moment, it is depathologizing mental health. And knowing the way my brain works, it's going to be this for a while. And then when I move on from it, there's still going to be like little bits of it smoldering in the corners of the things that I write.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's writing though as well, and that's activism, isn't it? Because I think the more you look into things and the more you read your books on capitalism and big pharma and all that kind of thing, the more you realize your self-awareness grows and you realize that everything is connected. And I'm sorry, but most of it's shit. I
have to go off on a tangent here quickly, right?
Please, yes.
So weak central coherence says that we're incapable of seeing the bigger picture because as autistic people, we are constantly focused on the tiny details. That's utter bullcrap. I know, because constantly all I'm doing is seeing the bigger picture. Like I spend a lot of time on the tiny details, but people are constantly telling me, David, you're really good at seeing the bigger picture. I'm like, yeah, it's exhausting. Like,
Yeah, please. How do I stop this? I went in for the free subscription. I had an ADHD moment and didn't cancel it. Now I've got a bill every month for some shit I don't want. Please. I do not need this. Yeah, it is a funny thing. It is a really, really funny thing. And I think that might be with a few other neurodivergences as well, not just being autistic. And I think that interlaced with kind of intrusive thoughts that we were talking about earlier can make it intrusive thoughts even more intense, because it's it kind of turns into paranoia.
Yeah.
Because you can see the interweaving and the interlacing of all these things that appear to be invisible to other people.
Yeah.
And that's really destabilizing.
It is. It's exhausting. And as a psychotic person, like I know firsthand what it's like for your brain to be like connecting all these dots. And sometimes, especially when you're psychotic, some of the dots don't actually exist.
Yes.
But you've got so used to spotting dots that you are convinced you can see that dot right there. And there you can watch them all becoming connected. And then there's just this moment where your brain goes, here's a new reality. Like,
yeah.
And, you know, it's quite easy to see. Like, it doesn't surprise me that I am not the only autistic person who is psychotic.
Do you have any? I wonder, just because you read about this prolifically, do you have any kind of stats or any kind of idea of what that overlap might actually look like?
I don't have any stats, but the research I've read has suggested that there is an increased likelihood for autistic people to also meet criteria for things like schizophrenia and other schizophrenia spectrum conditions. And, you know, a lot more autistic people need access to things like early intervention services. So like first episode psychosis services and stuff like that. And Tanya, I mean, we'll have to do a whole live on this, but Tanya gave me this wonderful thing called monotropic spiral, and it's a great word, 2 words. You know, it gave me this idea for the burnout to psychosis cycle in autistic people. So you get burnt out, your brain tries to do what autistic brains do, which is become monotropically focused. You become monotropically focused on something you really shouldn't. You spiral on it, monotropic spiral, and that leads to psychosis. Now, I would love to see some research to actually look and see if I'm right. Like,
so there it is. Any psychological researchers watching?
Yeah, I won't pay you to do it because none of you have ever paid me for giving you my emotional labor.
Because we bought. Okay, so just do it for us, please. Yeah, it would be. I don't know if did you do a video with Tanya about monotropism and monotropic spiral? Have we done a video on Aucademy on that yet?
Truthfully, I lose track of what videos I've done.
I lose track of the ones I was in.
You know, 3 years ago, I was just writing a blog largely for myself, and now all of a sudden I'm doing videos all the time and podcasts, and I'm a bit like, I don't actually know what I'm doing. Well, I know what I'm doing, but I can't remember what it is I've done.
Yeah. I think
I said to you earlier, didn't I? Just as we were going to get ready to come on here, I was like, I don't know what I've actually done since we last saw each other.
Ate sushi.
Ate sushi and did a consultation. Besides that, I can't. But that doesn't account for all the time. Like, I don't know what happened to that period of time.
No, neither do I. And I was sat there doing whatever, and then I was thinking, oh my god, it's 3:45. I've got to pick up my son from nursery. I was like, oh my god, quick! In my pajamas. I was out in my pajamas the second time today. Getting him from nursery. Oh, yeah.
Are you even a parent if you haven't picked up your child from nursery in your pajamas at least once?
I don't know, especially around this area. Where I live is, it's like pajama central, mate. It's almost weird going out in like outside clothes.
Yeah.
So I did. I went to Lidl earlier in pajamas as well. I just thought bollocks. I'm not getting anything done today, and I think that although that's just chit chatty, like what we were writing about earlier about not necessarily embracing your mental health concerns, but coexisting with them. And for me, I knew today that I hate food shopping. I hate food shopping. I am not the only autistic person who hates food shopping. I like the very specific Lidl that's around the corner from us, because I'm going to park in the same place every time. It's going to be the same cashier that you know, like same, lovely. And I like Lidl because it doesn't have noise. It hasn't got really tall, really high ceilings, which I find really difficult. So, and it hasn't got loads of choices. It's got like 3 of one thing, and that's it. And if it isn't there, then bollocks, which I'm here for. So I go in there. What was the point I was making? But I thought to myself, I'm not going to be able to. I have a choice. I can either shower and get changed today and pick up little man, because I obviously have to pick him up from nursery. Or I can go and do shopping, and then I'll see about showering and getting changed later, which turned into, oh fuck, I've got to go now. So like, I think that's definitely coexisting with mental health, because my personal care is definitely not where I would like it to be. Anyways, I don't care about where it should be, but where I would like it to be personally is not where it is. But I don't beat myself up about it anymore. Whereas I really, really used to. And you know what? If I've got to go out in my pajamas and do something, then bollocks to everyone else. I don't. I'm doing the thing that I need to do. If I'm not doing it in the appropriate manner that I'm supposed to be doing it, then I don't really care.
Yeah.
And I think coexisting is sometimes kind of meeting your mental health halfway, maybe.
Yeah.
That's the way I always see it. Is a compromise between, and I think there's definitely a PDA element to that as well, most definitely. Which I now can't remember the nice way of saying PDA.
Pervasive drive for autonomy.
Drive for autonomy. What I sometimes call punk demand avoidance, because I remember that easier. But even the fact that that's called pathological demand avoidance, is interesting, and also that it's called that even though it's not in any diagnosis manual anywhere. So where has it come from? Not where has PDA come from, because it exists.
No, but where does the pathological bit come from? Like,
who's come up with this name? If this is not something that is clinically measurable, treatable, diagnosable, whatever, who's come up with this? But thankfully there are 1,000,001 really cool people online who are like, yeah, it's called this, but we're going to call it something else. So now we can still use PDA and know that we're not shaming or belittling ourselves or censoring ourselves as like ill people. But I know that if I tell myself that I'm going to do something and then somebody else tells me I'm going to do that thing, then
you immediately won't do the thing. Yeah,
it's over. And I can't explain that to anybody. I can explain that to my brother, because my brother is exactly the same, but perhaps more aggressive with not doing it. But yeah, he's very firm with what he's not going to do. But yeah, so it definitely exists. But it's interesting that the pathological was part of that, and now isn't within our community.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, I mean, I wonder what you think of coexisting with your particular mental health concerns. Have you found anything that kind of works for you, or perhaps any, now we've ragged on everything and everything's terrible. What can we do about it? What do you find is helpful for you when you're having,
I mean, the thing that's most helpful for me, and I'm going to make it sound way more simple than it actually is, it is that coexistence. It's, okay, I am feeling in a particular way. I'm not enjoying this feeling, but I'm going to sit here. I will observe the feeling. I'll acknowledge the feeling. And then I have to just try and remember that this feeling will pass. The problem is you don't know how long it's going to take to pass. And when you're in that feeling, it feels like that's how you're going to feel forever. Like,
because I don't know if you ever struggle with kind of alexithymia, like being able to, I know you know what it means, but just for other people as well who might not be in the know, being able to understand, name, and then be able to explain to another human being what's going on with your feelings, let alone what they are a reaction to. Is that something you kind of experience? Or
very often I will say to people, I don't feel good, and they'll go, what's wrong? And I'll go, I don't know. I just don't feel good. Like, and sometimes that's the most I can acknowledge. I've got pretty good at identifying anxiety, because at any given moment, I'm generally at least a 3 out of 10 on the anxiety scale. Like that's like my baseline.
Yeah. Okay.
So I recognize anxiety. But like, for example, I can't tell the difference between anxiety and excitement. If I get really excited about something, I will think I'm having a panic attack. Like, I am convinced I'm having a panic attack, and people are like, but David, you're really looking forward to this. I'm like, I know, but like, I'm so excited that my heart's trying to tear its way out of my chest.
Oh, I can actually die. That's how excited I am about this. I'm just going to cry now. It's fine. Yeah, because so many of them, like anxiety and excitement, for me feel very similar, like within my body.
They're almost identical, in my opinion. Like,
so yeah, I just don't have that ability to work out the intricacies and the nuances of stuff, or even because I might still be processing something that happened 4 months ago that I didn't even realize was affecting me. Like I didn't realize at the time that it affected me, but because of rumination and stuff like that, it's come back into the picture, and I'm now reacting to that. So not only is it, what does it feel like in my body? What is the actual feeling? What on earth is this a feeling in regards to? Someone please tell me. And then, like you say, having to sit with that is a lot. Like, we're coexisting with a lot of stuff. It's not, none of us are sitting here doing really well at that every single day. And, I don't want people hearing this today and thinking, oh, it's going to be perfect and I need to, be on this all the time, because that's just not how these things work.
No.
Yeah.
But one of the things that does help me actually with coexisting is certain forms of mindfulness.
Okay.
So obviously I struggle quite a lot with alexithymia. So one of the things that I started practicing, which helps me, is using a form of meditation called a body scan.
Okay.
So you lie down and you focus on different parts of your body, working your way either up from the feet or down from the head. And you take note of the sensations and things you can feel in those. And what I found was that helped kind of connect me and ground me in, okay, I'm feeling a negative emotion. What part of my body am I feeling it in? And I was then able to start translating different bodily sensations into, I think this is what I'm feeling. And just being able to acknowledge that without reacting to it was really helpful. Plus, mindfulness is really good for not being reactive, because the whole thing is about, observing the way you feel rather than it doesn't work for everyone, but for me, it's been very helpful. And actually, there was a time when I wasn't supposed to do mindfulness because, for example, being psychotic, if I'm actively psychotic, some research has indicated that mindfulness can make it much worse.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine that. I can absolutely imagine that. This is gonna be really peculiar, but I'm just gonna ask Jay, who's my husband.
Hello.
Who disagreed with what David said anyways.
Yes, massively.
So you remember that app that we had for a little while that was mindfulness? What was that called?
Headspace.
Headspace. So Headspace might be useful for some people. That was free for a little while, I believe. I don't know if it was...
Yeah, it was free for like 10 sessions or whatever like that. But certain insurance companies give it to you for 6 months for free and stuff like that as well.
What, like health insurance and stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's interesting. If you didn't hear Jay say that, you can get it free for a certain amount of time, but actually some health insurances and stuff cover that as well, which is quite interesting.
I use Calm personally. I use the Calm app.
Okay.
I think it's about £35 a year.
Okay.
There is a lot of stuff on the Calm app, like a lot, like guided meditations, sleep stories, gentle like white noise and music. Like there is so much stuff on that app. So, obviously there is a financial cost to access all of it. There's a free version of it, but you can subscribe on a yearly subscription. And then there's literally just so much stuff on that app.
Okay. Well, that's
and they have a section specifically for kids as well. So, if you've got an anxious kid and you want them to try out some meditation, they have a section on the Calm app specifically for children.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's
very
cool.
Similar.
Okay. Like that. Yeah. For people who don't know, my husband Jay's area of interest is kind of counselling and stuff like that, isn't it? So
yeah, counselling and psychotherapy. Yeah.
That's what I was asking him. That, and I never remember the name for anything. Who knew? And also, I feel like sometimes when you do, because we did the app that I've just forgotten the name of. Headspace. Thank you. We did Headspace, and I think because unless I'm in conversation, so when David and I were writing earlier, I was saying, yeah, the laptop's going to go around the house with me because I can't sit still because I've got to do X, Y, and Z, and it needs to be done now in my brain. So I find the idea of sitting down for meditation or mindfulness actually quite difficult. But I think there's no real wrong way of doing that. So this Headspace was going on about a certain way to sit, which is obviously different for people who are physically disabled or, don't, if they're talking about planting 2 feet on the ground and you don't have 2 feet to plant on the ground, that can kind of put you off a bit. But I don't think there has to be a specific way that you do things. 9 times out of 10, when I did the Headspace thing, I just fell asleep, curled up in a ball, which is still relaxing, I suppose. Yeah. So
the key is, as long as you're grounding, that's the key, isn't it? That's the point. It's that certain seated position that you're talking about is a grounding technique in itself.
Yeah.
So, for David, obviously that is very much being laid on the floor and doing it that way from what you were saying. So, grounding is the key.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I think because I always think this is not sideswipe at you, David, at all. But there's a lot of people that, it's the whole yoga and eat healthy and exercise and, have you tried Pilates brigade? And you know exactly what I mean. Who say it to people with fibro and Ehlers-Danlos loss and all sorts of different things.
I have been told that cutting gluten out of my diet will help me with my psychosis. They don't actually explain how it's going to help. So, but apparently gluten causes psychosis. Okay. So I hear. That's sarcasm, by the way.
Less breads, less meds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
The English of that.
Sorry. Fewer breads, fewer meds. They've got the English, the grammar police sat next to me.
Or alternatively, a sandwich a day keeps the doctor in pay.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So I think, that there is that kind of health brigade of, you're not really disabled. You don't really have mental health. You just, need to eat more freaking purple kale.
This is that toxic positivity thing, though, isn't it? Like, everything can be fixed with food. Like, no, it can't. Stop.
I wish. I'd be very good.
I happen to know as well, much like I know there's no magic pill because I looked for one, I know for a fact that eating food doesn't help my mental health problems, because when I have mental health problems, eating is about all I do. I eat my feelings and I never feel better afterwards.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, that's a spiral as well, isn't it? Before I made my fewer breads, fewer meds thing, I was going to actually make a bloody point, but I've lost it now. So there it is. But yeah, there are even I found it again. Even there is some, don't necessarily be put off by what the health brigade have got to say, because there might be a truth in there for you somewhere, maybe. If you like David says about not finding the one medication and the one food, but it might actually be that something is out there for people that is I'm saying this not as a clinician, by the way. I'm just saying this as your neighborhood autistic. So I just wanted to leave people with an idea of, there is potentially impending doom, but what can we do in the meantime? And and I think coexisting with your mental health and your neurodivergence is definitely a thing. And also, like, if you're multiply neurodivergent or you're multiply disabled, coexisting with your mental health is different.
Well, to put it another way, when you are neurospicy.
When you are neurospicy, non-neuromild. I've
done it again, haven't
I? So just kind of coexisting with your mental health is different, because you've also got physical things you've got to think about as well. And I would say that's definitely a thing for me. Like, I have chronic migraine. Is my mental health particularly terrible after a bad bout of that? Yes. So coexisting with that is different from day to day, based on other things that are going on in our environment or in our bodies as well. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add to kind of like being multiply divergent, does it?
I think the point I'd like to make is that the whole reason we need to de-pathologize mental health, really, I think, especially after this conversation, is that the pathology paradigm treats everyone as a one-size-fits-all because of those neuronormative standards. But actually, every single person is an individual. This is the thing. There isn't even a binary of neurotypical, neurodivergent. Like, there's just lots of different people, and there's a few people in each area that have like some shared experiences. And it just happens that one particular group of those people have gone, we are the right way to be, and they're wrong. But fundamentally, we need to move away from the whole, this treatment worked well for this percentage of the population, so this is the best approach. Like, everyone is an individual. Everyone will have different things that work for them. And once again, I'm not saying this to encourage people to stop taking medication. I'm not qualified to say that. I'm not saying this to tell people that their therapy is wrong, because I'm not qualified to say that. I am saying this because there is an attitude in society of there is one right way to be, and actually that's wrong.
Yeah, it's and that's kind of bolstered by funding and money and various other things. So I just wondered if there was anything else we wanted to cover today, David. Or now we've put the world to rights,
I mean, I think we've probably covered most of the stuff for today. We've done it in record time as well. It only took an hour and a half.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And half an hour of actually going, what was I talking about? I had a point here, but I don't know.
I guess we should probably do the standard, end of live questions, shouldn't we?
Ooh. Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So newest or most favorite stim, David. What you got?
I mean, I am always cracking my knuckles and everything. Actually, I crack like a glow stick. I say this on every live.
Yeah, I was about to say.
What else have I been doing? I've been jiggling my legs a lot lately. It's really winding people up. I love it. And yeah, the leg jiggling one's probably my favorite, but purely because people keep telling me to stop, so I do it more.
Yeah, of course, naturally. Yeah.
And so now it's my favorite stim at the moment because people keep going, stop jiggling your legs. I'm like, no.
Jiggles more legs. Grows more legs so I can jiggle them too.
I wish I was an octopus.
Take that.
What about you?
How about me? I don't know. I don't necessarily have any new ones. I listen to a lot of music with my little boy, and I really enjoy that. And he dances to absolutely everything. So you've only got to hum something, whistle something, go do do do, and he's all like. And that's been really, really nice because sometimes Jay joins in with my stims, but now I've also got a tiny version of me who does it too, and that's really lovely. So a lot of dancing, a lot of silly noises. He also laughs like I'm funny to somebody. Hooray! I did it. It's 18 months. I don't know how long it's going to last, but I'll take it. And then I never know what the next question is going to be. Is it, what is your favorite potato-based dish? Oh, it's a little bit different to usual because usually it's what's your favorite kind of potato?
But I can work with this. Bubble and squeak.
Ooh, okay. Potato-based dish. I don't know. Fish pie. Oh, yeah. Fish pie. Don't make that face, David. You don't know. You don't understand.
I had some bad experiences with fish pie. And
well, okay. Yeah. I actually quite like it, David. The less said, the better. Yeah. There's something nice about a pie that's not a pastry, but is topped with mashed potato. That's a special thing. Whether that's
can we count sweet potatoes amongst potato-based dishes? Because if so, I would like to put in my vote for cottage pie topped with sweet potato instead of regular potatoes. It is really good.
Yes, Jay also enjoys. I actually quite like sweet potato fries as well. They're very nice. Quite a fan of sweet potatoes in this house.
You've got to try the sweet potato cottage pie. It is, it's good.
Nice. Yeah, lovely. Right. So I suppose... Oh, yes, I've got to tell you about next Wednesday's session, which is Mel Hauser is joining us to discuss all the things. Well, there it is. It's a surprise for me. It's a surprise for you. We will see what happens next Wednesday. And yeah, I suppose it's time for awkward waving goodbye. Perhaps a little bit of dancing. I will dance, of course. Bye. Hang on.